You wake up every morning, sip your coffee, glance at the clock and feel that dull throb behind your eyes, the same one that's been with you for years. It's not a migraine. It's something subtler, something existential. A quiet whisper that says, "Is this it?" And yet, every day you override that whisper with obligation, with bills, with traffic, with trying to make it. Terence McKenna would tell you, that ache isn't your fault, it's a symptom of being born into a system that taught you what to want before you even learned to question. Before you could understand your own interior world, you were taught to measure your worth by productivity, obedience, and external success. That is the first mistake, not realizing that your discontent isn't personal failure. It's the natural response of a mind resisting the unnatural. McKenna's core message wasn't about psychedelics, not really. It was about the primacy of experience. He argued that culture is not your friend, that the very fabric of what we're told to value often serves to suppress true individuality. The mistake we make isn't lack of effort. It's trying to thrive in an environment that punishes originality and rewards conformity. So many people in midlife find themselves disoriented, having followed every rule, checked every box, only to arrive in a place that feels hollow. This is not failure, this is awakening. The system taught you to chase goals that never belonged to you. Now you must ask, what would I pursue if I wasn't afraid of stepping outside the script? This reflection isn't just about achievement, it's about freedom. And freedom starts with rejecting the idea that you are broken and recognizing that you've been trapped inside someone else's story. If this reflection has already touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and share in the comments. What part spoke to you the most? Now let's continue. From childhood, you were likely asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? As if there were only one answer, as if being was something you had to earn through a job title. Terence McKenna warned us about this cultural programming, the idea that life is a linear path leading to a single, respectable identity. Doctor, lawyer, teacher, manager. But what if your soul was never meant to become anything the system offered? The mistake isn't failure to follow the right path. The mistake is believing there is one. McKenna saw culture as a controlled hallucination, a consensus reality that rewards predictability and discourages deviation. In this context, choosing your own path becomes radical. For those in their 40s, 50s, or beyond, it can feel disorienting to question the very structure that has shaped your life. But the truth is, many of the roads we've taken were never ours to begin with. They were mapped by fear, expectation, and a deep need for approval. What happens when you realize that the job, the house, the retirement plan, none of it ever touched the core of who you are? What happens when you wake up and ask, if this isn't it, then what is? This is where many people falter. Instead of turning inward, they double down, trying harder to fit into a life that already feels too small. But McKenna insisted that the real adventure begins when we abandon the pre-approved routes and enter the unknown. Not recklessly, but consciously. With curiosity. The illusion of the right path keeps us trapped in lives we no longer believe in. To achieve anything truly meaningful, we must be willing to walk off the well-lit road and into the dark forest of our own truth. There is a strange comfort in agreement, in being part of the crowd, nodding along, even when something inside you whispers otherwise. That's what McKenna called consensus reality, the shared dream we're taught to believe is real simply because everyone else does. But beneath that agreement lies a quiet danger, the erosion of your own perception. When you suppress your instincts to fit into collective norms, you slowly disconnect from what McKenna called the felt presence of immediate experience. That means the raw, unfiltered now, not what you should feel, but what you actually feel. It's subtle. It happens when you laugh at things you don't find funny, agree with values you don't believe, or stay in roles that shrink you. You become a stranger to yourself. Especially in midlife, this can become unbearable. You may realize you've spent decades constructing a life that impresses others, but fails to nourish you. That's not just disappointing, it's disorienting. That creates a kind of inner vertigo, You ask, if I step away from what everyone else is doing, will I disappear? McKenna's answer was clear. You will disappear from their version of you, but you'll also reappear in your own life. The cost of consensus is your voice, and the reward of questioning it is your liberation. He encouraged people to become culture scouts, observers, not automatic participants. This requires courage, especially in a culture like America's, where success is often equated with conformity, dressed up as ambition. But the soul doesn't care about appearances. It cares about truth. It cares about connection, beauty, depth, and aliveness. To achieve anything meaningful, you must first stop achieving for an audience that doesn't see you. Step outside the crowd, even if your voice shakes, especially if it does. In our hyper-connected world, we are drowning in information. Podcasts, books, articles, news feeds, all claiming to help us improve, optimize, succeed. But Terence McKenna drew a sharp distinction between information and wisdom. Information fills the mind. Wisdom transforms the soul. We've mistaken accumulation for growth. We collect knowledge like trophies, hoping that more data will finally unlock the answers we seek. But what if the problem isn't that we don't know enough, but that we've stopped listening to ourselves? McKenna often warned of becoming a passive consumer of ideas. He believed that true understanding comes not from memorizing what others have said, but from direct experience, sitting with a thought, feeling its shape, noticing its impact on your inner landscape. This kind of knowing doesn't shout, it whispers. Think about how often you've scrolled through a feed or listened to a podcast hoping for a breakthrough, only to feel more overwhelmed afterward. That's the trap. We confuse stimulation for clarity. But clarity doesn't come from the outside. It emerges when the noise settles, when we're still enough to notice what's already present. For those in their 40s, 50s and beyond, the challenge isn't lack of information. It's the fatigue of never having digested it. Wisdom requires integration, sitting in silence, reflecting, letting go of the urge to always be informed and instead asking, what do I actually believe? McKenna suggested a radical act: turn off the input, go inward, listen. Not for 5 minutes, but for days, weeks, maybe longer. Because in that silence, your own voice can finally rise above the static. And it may not speak in language, it may come as a feeling, an image, a knowing. To avoid the mistake that kills potential, we must stop worshipping information and begin cultivating presence. That's where real achievement begins. There's a subtle war that starts in midlife, a quiet conflict between the desire for change and the gravitational pull of routine. You begin to sense that time is passing faster. Days blur, years vanish, and suddenly you're asking, how did I get here so quickly? But Terence McKenna would argue that time isn't the problem. Our relationship to time is. And much of that relationship is shaped by routine. Not the kind that supports life, but the kind that numbs it. McKenna believed that time is elastic, that it stretches or contracts based on the quality of our awareness. Think back to moments of true presence, a deep conversation, a sunset that made you tear up, a risky decision that made your heart race. In those moments, time felt expansive, even sacred. Now contrast that with the autopilot days. Wake, work, scroll, sleep. Those days collapse into nothing. The mistake many make is treating routine as security, but routine, when unconscious, becomes a slow erasure of the self. Especially in cultures like America's, where productivity is prized and rest is seen as laziness, we're taught to measure time by output rather than meaning. Midlife often brings a terrifying realization. You've traded wonder for predictability, and that predictability has kept you safe but also small. McKenna urged us to reclaim time by disrupting routine, not recklessly but intentionally. Try something unfamiliar. Break a pattern, speak a truth you've been avoiding. Even small acts can puncture the trance of repetition and restore depth to your days. To achieve anything real, you must stop waiting for time to give you permission. Time is not your enemy. Unconscious living is. Wake up from the loop. Inject awe into your hours. That's when life starts to feel like yours again. Many people go their whole lives without ever truly changing. not because they lack the desire, but because they are paralyzed by one quiet, invisible force, the fear of being wrong. Terence McKenna saw this fear as a tool of control. He believed that institutions, educational, religious, corporate, teach us from an early age that to be wrong is to be punished, to fail is to be shamed. Over time, we internalize that message, and it mutates into a chronic need to avoid risk, to play it safe, to avoid doing or saying anything that might expose us to judgment. But here's the hidden cost. Every safe choice becomes a small betrayal. You betray your creativity by not sharing your strange, beautiful ideas. You betray your relationships by not expressing what's truly in your heart. You betray your future by assuming it has to look like your past. And eventually, you betray yourself by accepting a life that feels fine, but not alive. McKenna believed that mistakes are essential to transformation. He wasn't interested in being right. He was interested in seeing clearly. And often clarity only arrives after we've wandered into confusion, discomfort, and contradiction. That's where real insight lives, not in certainty but in willingness. Especially for those in their 40s and beyond, this fear of being wrong can solidify into a kind of emotional paralysis. What if I leave this job and regret it? What if I speak my truth and lose people? But the deeper question is, what is the cost of not trying? To achieve anything that truly matters, you must accept the possibility of being wrong, gloriously, courageously, even beautifully wrong. Because on the other side of that risk is not shame, but freedom. Somewhere along the way, we were taught to treat the mind like a machine. Efficient, linear, logical. We diagnose it when it breaks, optimize it for performance, and expect it to produce results. But Terence McKenna saw the mind differently, as something wild, organic, mysterious. Not a machine, but a garden. And a garden needs very different things than a machine. It needs space, darkness, time. It needs compost, the ability to turn what is dead or discarded into nourishment. It grows best when tended with care, but not controlled with force. The mistake we make, especially in high-achieving cultures like that of the US, is demanding productivity from the psyche instead of relationship. We force ourselves to think clearly when we're grieving. We expect focus during burnout. We punish ourselves for not being positive enough, strong enough, disciplined enough. But what if your mind isn't malfunctioning? What if it's trying to bloom and you're smothering it with unrealistic expectations? McKenna believed that the imagination is the key to human evolution, and imagination doesn't thrive under pressure. It needs curiosity, play, a certain sacred laziness, a willingness to wander. But most adults, especially past 40, feel disconnected from imagination. Not because it's gone, but because it's been buried under decades of mental rigidity. So how do we begin to reclaim this garden? Start by honoring the seasons of your own mind. Let thoughts come and go without rushing to fix or analyze. Give yourself permission to rest. Daydream. Reflect without agenda. Let your internal soil breathe. Because to achieve anything deep, not just material success, but emotional and existential fulfillment, you must stop treating your mind like a broken tool. Instead, begin to see it as fertile ground, patiently waiting to grow something unexpected. There's a whisper that lives in the back of the mind, especially in adulthood. It says, later, not now. Someday, it tells us we'll pursue the dream after retirement. We'll speak the truth when the time is right. We'll reclaim ourselves, just not today. Terence McKenna called this the myth of postponement, a culturally inherited belief that life exists on the other side of some imaginary milestone. It's one of the most seductive and socially accepted forms of self-abandonment. We tell ourselves that delay is responsibility, that it's mature to wait. But often, later is just fear in disguise. Especially by midlife, this myth can become dangerous. You've built systems around survival, carved out predictability, and created a rhythm that works, sort of. But beneath that rhythm is a growing awareness. You've edited yourself to fit a life that no longer fits you. McKenna urged us to confront the now, not with panic, but with reverence. He believed that the present moment is not just a place in time, it's a dimension of consciousness. And if you're always aiming at the future, you're living everywhere except where your life actually is. The mistake isn't failure. It's postponing aliveness in the name of safety. It's waiting to be seen, waiting to be ready, waiting to be perfect. But readiness never arrives the way we hope, and perfection is a moving target designed to keep you small. Real change, the kind that alters your inner landscape, begins when you reject the myth of later and commit to this moment as messy and unresolved as it is. Because your real life isn't waiting for you out there. It's here, and it's asking, will you finally show up? By now, a pattern has emerged. The messages we inherited about success, worth, safety, achievement begin to unravel under closer inspection. Terence McKenna's voice, though unconventional, calls us back to something ancient, the inner frontier, a place untouched by systems, roles, or approval. A place where awakening, not accomplishment, is the true goal. And yet, awakening isn't glamorous. It doesn't come with applause or recognition. Often it comes quietly, as a shift in how you see. You start to notice how many of your desires were planted by someone else. How much of your energy has gone into sustaining a version of yourself that was never fully real. McKenna didn't offer step-by-step formulas. What he offered was a mirror and the unsettling freedom to choose a different way. He believed that if you aren't living your story, you're probably living someone else's. And no matter how successful that version looks on the outside, it will always feel incomplete on the inside. This is the mistake that ruins potential, living according to a borrowed map. Real success, according to McKenna, isn't measured in wealth, titles, or even legacy. It's measured in presence, in the ability to meet reality without flinching, to feel your life fully, to create from the inside out, to follow your curiosity even when it scares you, especially when it scares you. For those in midlife and beyond, this awakening often comes at a cost, of letting go, of shedding identities, of risking reinvention. But what's the alternative? To die with the music still in you? To become a perfect mask, well-behaved and deeply unfulfilled? You can achieve anything, but only if you stop chasing illusions and start honoring your own inner authority. The real journey begins not when you succeed in the world's eyes, but when you wake up to your own. That's the only achievement that truly matters. We've all had moments where a quiet thought rises, uninvited, inconvenient, and often ignored. It says, "This isn't right," or "You need to go," or maybe just, "Something's missing." And almost every time we dismiss it, we label it anxiety. We tell ourselves we're overthinking. We distract, delay, deny. But Terence McKenna insisted that this inner voice is not the problem. It's the compass. In a world engineered for external noise, notifications, headlines, obligations, our inner guidance system often gets buried, but it never disappears. It speaks through restlessness, curiosity, longing, discomfort. And when ignored for too long, it becomes something heavier. Resentment, disconnection, even depression. Especially in adulthood, when routines harden and roles define us, that voice can feel like a threat. But in truth, it's an invitation to come home to yourself. McKenna believed that the universe communicates through patterns, symbols, feelings, not just logic. That your inner voice is part of that communication. Not mystical in a vague way, but deeply practical. It knows when something's off. It knows when your energy is shrinking. It knows when you're pretending. So the real danger isn't listening to that voice. It's silencing it for too long. If you want to achieve something real, something that aligns with who you truly are, you must become fluent in your own intuition. You must stop treating your deepest insights as distractions and start treating them as sacred instructions. Because no system, no expert, no ideology knows your path better than that still small voice inside. And the longer you ignore it, the further you drift from yourself. So listen, not just with your ears, but with your life.